The dog would not move. Staff Sergeant Cole Rader said the command twice, then a third time. Diesel, 91 pounds of Belgian Malinois, 6 years of combat service, a dog who had never once refused a direct order in his life, stood frozen in the middle of the Millhaven, Wyoming Veterans Day parade route and refused. Not confused. Not distracted. Frozen, his hackles rose like a ridge down the center of his back. His ears locked forward. His amber eyes had fixed on a point somewhere in the crowd lining Main Street, and whatever they had found there had stopped him the way nothing Cole had ever said, signaled, or commanded had managed to stop him before. The crowd watched. The band behind them stumbled to silence. A child near the front of the barricade line pressed herself small against her mother's leg, and nobody moved, and nobody breathed, and the dog stood in the center of the road as if the world ended at the edge of his sight line, and he alone could see what waited just beyond it. Cole had been working with Diesel for 4 years. He knew every behavior in the dog's vocabulary. This was not one of them. Before we go further, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story moves you, please subscribe and follow it until the very end. What you are about to hear is something no one on that parade route in Millhaven will ever forget. Cole Rader was 38 years old and moved through the world the way men move when they have stopped being afraid of it. He was lean and broad through the shoulders, 6 feet even, with close-cropped black hair, and a jaw that had been squared by genetics and hardened by circumstance, and his eyes were a dark, settled brown that people who met him once tended to remember long after they'd forgotten everything else about him. Not warm, steady. The kind of steady that doesn't ask for anything and doesn't offer apologies for what it is. He'd been told he was intimidating. He'd never understood the complaint. He was simply paying attention. He had served 8 years with the 75th Ranger Regiment out of Fort Benning, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, and 1 classified rotation into northern Syria that his discharge paperwork listed only as special operations support. He'd come home from the last one with a shoulder that required 3 surgeries and a Bronze Star with valor that he kept in a drawer in his bedroom because he didn't know what to do with it, and that felt like the wrong kind of display for a thing that had cost someone else their life. His ranger buddy Theo Wasilewski had not come home from Syria. Cole had. He'd spent 2 years not quite understanding why. He'd applied for Diesel through the Military Working Dog Adoption Program 14 months after his medical discharge. The Army's paperwork had taken 9 months. Cole had filled out every form twice and driven to 3 different facilities in person before someone with authority had looked at him across a conference table and told him that the adoption was approved. He had shaken the man's hand and driven 4 hours back to Millhaven and sat in his truck in the driveway for 20 minutes before going inside because he hadn't trusted himself to speak. He'd been waiting for something to feel right again. Diesel was it. The dog was a Belgian Malinois, 6 years old, with a coat the color of tawny wheat across the body and dark as scorched earth along the saddle, ears, and muzzle. He weighed 91 pounds and carried it without effort, the way working dogs carry what they've earned. Not weight, just capacity. His left ear had a crescent notch clipped from its tip, a souvenir from a vehicle breach in Kandahar in 2022, when a pressure plate had detonated 18 inches too close, and the scar had healed pale and clean and permanent. He moved through spaces the way Cole had been trained to, reading them first, committing after. He did not react to noise, he reacted to meaning. In 14 months together, he had not once reacted to something that wasn't there. Which was why Cole was standing in the middle of a Veterans Day parade in Millhaven, Wyoming, holding a leash attached to 91 pounds of dog who had decided that the command did not apply to this situation. He did not repeat the command a 4th time. he looked at Diesel instead. The dog's gaze had not moved. Cole followed it, tracking the vector from Diesel's eyes out through the crowd, past the flags and the bleachers and the row of children in red and white, and found a man. He was standing at the far edge of the crowd, near the Veterans Memorial bench at the end of the barricade line. He was large, mid-40s, in a green canvas jacket with the collar turned up against the November cold. He held a paper coffee cup in one hand and a phone in the other, and he was not watching the parade. He was watching the bench behind him, where an older woman sat wrapped in a quilt, a small girl pressed against her side. The girl's face turned toward the parade route, with the expression of someone who was trying very hard to be glad about something. Diesel had not looked away from the man in the green jacket. He didn't know yet what the dog had found. He would understand later. His name was Derek Holt. He was 44 years old, the son-in-law of Eleanor Mapes, who was 71 and a widow, and the grandmother of the small girl beside her, whose name was Gracie, and who was 9 years old, and who had not spoken a single word in public in 8 months. Derek Holt was not Eleanor's son. He was the man who had married Eleanor's daughter, Lynette. 4 years before Lynette died of a cancer that moved faster than any of the treatments her doctors tried, and he was the man who had remained in the house after Lynette died. Because he had been named a co-trustee of the estate, and because Gracie had no one else, and because Eleanor was 71 and lived alone in Cody and couldn't always drive. He had told Eleanor and the family attorney that he intended to sell the house and move Gracie to a smaller rental on the east side of Millhaven, closer to the school. He had not mentioned that the rental property he'd identified was owned by a man named Roland Fitch, who was Derek's fraternal uncle, and who had agreed to a lease arrangement that would route a portion of every month's rent directly to a shared account. He had not mentioned that he had spent 3 weeks reviewing Lynette's life insurance settlement, a $280,000 policy that Gracie was the named beneficiary of, with a private attorney who specialized in estate restructuring for minors. He had not mentioned any of this because no one had asked, and because Derek Holt had learned early in life that the easiest way to do something that other people would object to was to do it before they understood what was happening. The family attorney, a woman named Sandra Pell, who had drawn up Lynette's will and who had worked in Millhaven for 31 years, had called Eleanor 3 days ago with a concern. She had found language in a petition Derek had filed with the county court, a petition seeking expanded trustee authority over Gracie's financial assets that she did not believe Lynette had ever intended. She was not certain. The law was not clear. But something in the filing had made her call. Eleanor had brought Gracie to the parade today because Lynette had brought her to this parade every year of her life, and Eleanor thought that Gracie needed the normal things, the things her mother would have done. Eleanor sat on the bench at the end of the route, with the quilt her own mother had made folded around both of them, and Gracie watched the parade with careful eyes, and Derek Holt stood 10 feet away and watched Derek Holt's phone. The dog had found him. Cole didn't fully understand what he was seeing, but he had 8 years of training that told him to trust his dog and then figure out why later. He looked at Diesel. Diesel looked at the crowd. Cole unclipped the leash to give the dog full range, a decision that earned an immediate murmur from the crowd, and waited. Diesel did not run. He walked. Slowly and deliberately, the way he walked when he was not responding to a threat but moving toward something he had determined required his presence. He passed the barricade. He passed the row of children in red and white. He passed Derek Holt without pausing or looking at him. And he walked directly to the bench at the end of the line and sat down next to the small girl named Gracie. The crowd went quiet. Gracie looked at the dog. Diesel looked at Gracie. For 3 seconds, nobody said anything and nobody moved. And then the girl lifted one small hand and placed it on the dog's head with the particular gentleness of a child who has learned that gentle is the only thing she can offer. And Diesel pressed his head upward into her palm the way he pressed against Cole when Cole was in pain. And the gesture was so clear and so complete that a woman near the barricade, who had never seen either of them before, put her hand over her mouth and turned away. Cole had moved forward the moment Diesel settled. He was close enough now to see the man in the green jacket watching this from 10 feet away with an expression that was not warmth and was not confusion. It was calculation. Cole had seen that expression before. Not on parade grounds and not in Wyoming, but in places far from here, on faces that had determined the ratio between what they wanted and what stood in the way of it. Cole stepped to the bench. He introduced himself to Eleanor by name and rank, which he still used by habit. He asked if they were all right. Eleanor looked at him with the careful eyes of a woman who has spent 71 years learning when to trust a stranger and when not to, and then she looked at Diesel, who had not moved from Gracie's side, and something settled in her face. "No," she said quietly. "We are not entirely all right." Derek Holt appeared at Cole's shoulder within 30 seconds. He was a large man, broad through the middle, with a practiced smile of someone who had worked sales long enough to have made it reflex. He offered Cole his hand. Cole looked at it and did not take it. "Family event," Derek said pleasantly. "We appreciate the dog's attention, but Gracie has had a difficult year and we don't want to overwhelm her." Diesel turned his head and looked at Derek Holt. He did not growl. He did not show his teeth. He simply looked, with the still and systematic attention of a dog who has been trained to identify what a person is prepared to do and what they are prepared to hide, and Derek Holt, a man who was not easily unnerved, stepped back exactly half a step. "She seems fine," Cole said. She was. Gracie had not looked up from the dog. Her hand had moved from the top of Diesel's head to his ears, working gently along the fur, and she was looking at the notch in his left ear with the focused interest of a child who has found the most interesting thing in the room. She touched it carefully with one finger. Diesel's ear twitched and held. Gracie made a sound that was not quite a word, something like a question. And Eleanor made a sound in response that was something like relief. Derek Holt's smile had not moved. "My daughter is shy," he said. "She does better at home." Cole looked at the man for one long moment without speaking. In the silence, he counted several things. The slight tension in Holt's jaw, the way the man's thumb was working the side of his paper cup, the way Gracie's body had angled 45 degrees away from Holt, without the girl appearing to be aware she'd done it. 8 years of reading rooms in contested spaces had trained Cole to notice the things people did not know they were communicating. He noticed all of it. He said nothing. He handed Eleanor one of the cards he carried from his service dog outreach work with the Millhaven VFW post and told her he was easy to reach and that Diesel seemed to have decided she was good company. Eleanor took the card with both hands. Derek Holt watched from behind his smile. That evening, Cole made 2 calls. The first was to his contact at the Millhaven Police Department, a sergeant named Ardis Fowler who had served 12 years with the Wyoming National Guard and who owed Cole a favor from a situation 2 years ago involving a meth lab on Route 26 that Cole had located and Ardis had received the credit for. He didn't ask Ardis for anything specific. He described Derek Holt, the address Eleanor had mentioned in passing, and the name of the family attorney Sandra Pell, and he asked Ardis to look into whether there was anything recent involving Holt and the county estate court. There was. Ardis called back in 40 minutes. Derek Holt had filed 3 separate petitions with the county court in the past 6 weeks. The first requested expanded control over the disbursement of Gracie's insurance settlement. The second requested authority to restructure the girl's educational savings account into a joint trust. The third, filed 4 days ago and not yet reviewed by Sandra Pell, petitioned for a change of residential address for the minor child, citing instability in the current household and referencing Eleanor's age as a factor in the child's well-being. Taken individually, each petition had legal language that could be argued either way. Taken together, the direction was clear. The second call Cole made was to Sandra Pell, whose number Eleanor had mentioned when Cole pressed gently about who was looking after their interests. Sandra picked up on the third ring at 9:15 at night, which told Cole everything he needed to know about how she was sleeping. He told her about the third petition. There was a silence on the line. "I hadn't seen that one," she said. "I know," Cole said. "He filed it after our last conversation," Sandra said. "He's accelerating." Cole told her what he needed her to do. She said she would have the injunction paperwork ready by 9 the following morning. She did not ask him how a retired Army Ranger from the VFW outreach program had come to be coordinating legal strategy in a child welfare matter. Some questions don't need asking. Diesel had not come home calm that night. He'd settled near the front door rather than his bed, which was the behavior Cole associated with unfinished things, and Cole had sat in the chair near the window and let the quiet be what it was. He'd heard that quality of quiet once before, in a village outside Kandahar, holding a position with 4 men, waiting for the order that would either end the situation or change it permanently. There was a kind of silence that wasn't peace. It was the held breath before something broke. He knew it well. He waited. The following morning, Cole drove to the address Eleanor had given him. He parked 2 houses down and waited. At 8:47, Derek Holt's car backed out of the driveway. At 9:03, Cole knocked on the door. Eleanor answered it in a housecoat with a mug of coffee and the expression of a woman who had not slept. She looked at Cole. She looked at Diesel, who was standing at heel. She opened the door wider. Gracie was in the kitchen, eating cereal at a table covered in crayons, and when Diesel entered the room, she looked up from her bowl, and something happened in her face that was not quite a smile, but was the shape a smile remembers. She slid down from her chair. She crossed to Diesel and knelt beside him in her pajamas on the kitchen floor. Diesel did not wait for permission. He pressed his nose gently against her cheek and held it there. No one spoke for a moment. Then Gracie said one word, quietly and clearly, the first word she had said to anyone who was not Eleanor in 8 months. She said, "Stay." And Diesel sat down because it was a command, and he always obeyed commands. Cole and Eleanor went to the kitchen table. Eleanor had the relevant documents in a folder she had already assembled, which meant she had been waiting for someone to ask about them. She spread them out without being asked. Cole looked through them with the particular patience of a man who has learned to read things carefully before he acts on them. The pattern was exactly what Ardis and Sandra had described, a steady incremental movement, each document building on the last, the whole architecture of it designed to look like responsible guardianship right up until the moment it was complete. She trusted him, Eleanor said. Lynette trusted him, and for a while, so did I. When did that change? When Gracie stopped talking, Eleanor said, about 3 months after her mother died. The doctor said it was grief. Children process grief differently. Derek said it was because she needed more structure. She paused. He was always explaining Gracie to me. He'd known her 4 years. I'd known her 9. Cole closed the folder. He told Eleanor precisely what was going to happen and in what order and what she needed to do and what she needed to let Sandra do and what she needed not to do, which was nothing that would alert Derek Holt before the court had acted on the injunction. He gave it to her the way he'd given briefings in Ranger School, factual, sequential, complete. Eleanor listened without interrupting. When he was finished, she refilled his coffee without asking. He took that as understanding. They sat in the kitchen while Gracie drew at the far end of the table with Diesel lying at her feet, and the sun came through the window at an angle that made everything in the room look temporary and irreplaceable at once. Gracie pushed a drawing across the table. It was a dog with a notched ear and a girl with a ponytail and a blue sky above them drawn in broad, uninterrupted arcs. Cole looked at it for a moment. He did not gloat. He did not plan. He held the cup and felt the warmth come through the ceramic and thought about how much of the world is made of exactly this. One person deciding not to look past the thing they've seen. Sandra Pell filed the emergency injunction at 9:07 that morning, citing the third petition's reference to Eleanor's age as a deliberate and strategically timed escalation inconsistent with the deceased mother's documented wishes. The family court judge reviewed it at 11. The injunction was granted at 1:15 in the afternoon. Derek Holt received the court notice at 3:40 and drove to the house at 4. He found Cole's truck in the driveway and a Millhaven PD unit at the curb, because Artis Fowler had positioned it there at Cole's request, and because what Derek Holt had described as a family matter had, in the time since the parade, become something with more witnesses than he'd anticipated. Derek Holt stood on the porch with the court document in one hand and the phone in the other, and said to Cole, "This is between family." Cole said, "That's correct. That's why it's going to court." He said it the way he said everything, without heat, without satisfaction, without the slightest indication that this moment meant anything beyond what it was. He said it the way he had been trained to end things, which was without ceremony and without cruelty, and with complete awareness that the person in front of him was understanding, perhaps for the first time, that his particular power had an edge that he had not previously located. Derek Holt tried 3 more things. Cole let him try them. Then he pointed to Artis Fowler in the unit at the curb and told Derek that any further communication about the estate would go through Sandra Pell and through the court. Derek Holt left. Diesel watched him go from the porch. His ears dropped level. The hackles lay flat. He watched until the car turned off the block, and then he walked back inside through the open door and lay down next to Gracie's feet in the living room, and the long, deliberate exhale he released was so human in its quality that Eleanor said, softly, "Thank you" to the dog specifically, and meant it. The family court completed its review 7 weeks later. The expanded trustee petitions were denied in full. The residential relocation petition was dismissed as unsupported by evidence. A forensic accounting review of the estate, commissioned by Sandra Pell under the court's authority, identified $31,200 in undocumented transfers from estate accounts over the previous 14 months. The transfers had been routed through the rental arrangement with Roland Fitch. Derek Holt's attorney negotiated a plea to a single count of financial exploitation of a minor, which carried mandatory restitution, a 5-year supervised probation, and a permanent prohibition from serving as trustee or guardian in Wyoming. He moved out of Millhaven in February and did not contest the arrangement. Sandra Pell was named sole trustee of the estate the following spring. Eleanor was named Gracie's primary guardian. Both of these things were what Lynette's original documents had intended before the language had been quietly incrementally adjusted. 8 months after the parade, Gracie Mappes sat in a classroom at Millhaven Elementary and raised her hand to answer a question in front of 23 other children. Her teacher noted it in her file as a breakthrough. Eleanor cried when she heard about it, alone in her kitchen, which was something she had been waiting to do since November. Cole drove to the school with Diesel on the last day before winter break because the teacher had requested a therapy dog visit and because someone at the VFW post had mentioned Cole's outreach work and because it had sounded like a request he was going to say yes to before he'd finished hearing it. Gracie found Diesel in the gymnasium before he found her. She walked through the crowd of children as if she already knew where she was going and knelt down in front of him and said, as she always said, the one word she had trusted first. Stay, Diesel sat. And the room was warm and the day was ordinary, and ordinary was precisely what it was supposed to be. Cole drove home through roads he had begun to feel he knew, which was something he had not expected to feel in Wyoming or anywhere. The nerve damage in his shoulder was what it was. The drawer with the bronze star was still closed. The quiet in his house had changed without his having done anything to change it, which was the way the best changes arrived, not announced, just present. He pulled into the driveway. Diesel was asleep in the passenger seat, one ear twitching at something in a dream. Cole sat for a moment without moving. He was not waiting for something. He had stopped waiting. Sometimes God does not send rescue from a distance. Sometimes He places it 14 feet in front of you on a parade route in November. In a dog who refuses an order because he has seen something his handler hasn't yet, and it turns out the dog was right. Sometimes the miracle is not the dramatic arrival, but the quiet refusal. The thing that will not move because something worth protecting is close by, and refusing is the only language available, and it is enough. In every life there are people like Gracie, small, quiet, trying very hard to hold on to dignity while someone systematically dismantles the things around them. They do not always call out. They do not always know how. Sometimes all it takes is one person or one dog who is paying the right kind of attention and refuses to keep walking. God does not ask us to be remarkable. He asks us to be present, to pull over, to notice, to stay. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that good people are still out there, in the most ordinary places, on the most ordinary days. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and tell us, have you ever seen an animal respond to something a person couldn't yet see? Your story may be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you believe in stories of courage, loyalty, and the quiet miracles that walk on four legs, please subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. May God bless you, protect your family, and keep you watchful for the small voices that are trying, in whatever way they can, to be heard.